Phenomenon Radio, the show that covers thought-provoking breakthroughs in the fields of UAP UFOs to discover fascinating truths, first-hand accounts, and investigative insights into the expanding confluence of physical and mental exposure to this worldwide phenomenon. Hosted by Emmy award-winning investigative journalists, Earthfiles reporter and editor Linda Moulton Howe, and world-renowned experiencer of the 1980 Rendlesham Bentwaters incident, John Burroughs. And now, leading off tonight's program, here's Linda Moulton Howe.
Month and a half since the groundbreaking front page of the New York Times that headlined "Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's Mysterious UFO Program." The Times website contained a 34-second jet fighter gun camera infrared video of a UFO doing a rotation without losing altitude off the coast of San Diego, California, during November 2004 training exercises with the USS Nimitz. It was also referred to as the tic-tac video because the UFO was oblong and white-colored like tic-tac candy. The New York Times stressed that the infrared video was officially released by the Defense Department's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, also known as AAT IP. The front page article states, quote, "The Defense Department has never before acknowledged the existence of the AAT IP program," close quote. 2 days after the New York Times had released the Pentagon's 34-second infrared video, on Monday, December 18, 2017, the Washington Post released a 2-minute and 45-second longer infrared gun camera video identified as gimbal, which refers to technology. The background information states that this longer, more sensitive video, quote, means that the date, location, and other information have been removed by the originating authority as part of the release approval process, close quote. So there's the 34-second tic-tac, and then there's the 2-minute and 45-second more sensitive that is related to infrared video that was captured by U.S. Navy Commander David Fravor. We now know from Phenomenon co-host John Burroughs' research that Commander Fravor was stationed in the Middle East in 2004, so that might be where that UFO was and why the location is sensitive. The Pentagon official who released the 2 infrared videos from fighter jet gun cameras was Luis Elizondo, a senior covert intelligence officer who directed the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program from the 5th floor of the Pentagon Sea Ring from the year 2007 to 2012. On October 10, 2017, Mr. Elizondo resigned from his Pentagon position in a letter to U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis. The resignation reason that he gave to New York Magazine in December for an article entitled "The Pentagon Spent Millions on UFO Research" was that Mr. Elizondo said he protested government secrecy and opposition to his UFO investigation program. After his resignation, the very next day, on October 11, 2017, Luis Elizondo was one of the 5 Department of Defense aerospace and scientist experts that Blink 182 guitarist Tom DeLonge introduced in his Facebook live stream To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science event. Since 2015, Tom has been co-founder and president, along with co-founder Jim Semivan, who is vice president of operations of their company, To the Stars, Inc. Before this new venture, Mr. Semivan retired from 25 years as an operations officer both overseas and domestically for the Central Intelligence Agency. In addition to Luis Elizondo and Jim Semivan, the other 3 live stream participants and advisors for To the Stars, Inc. included Chris Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence in the DoD, Steve Justice, former Advanced Systems Director for Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, and Dr. Hal Puthoff, physicist and electrical engineer who is the director of the Institute for Advanced Studies in Austin, Texas. 2 weeks later, on December 30th, 2017, the 34-second video was linked by people on the web to a 2007 German film production company, Vision Unlimited, that specializes in 3D animation. That's when a rumor began spreading on the internet that the so-called tic-tac video released by Luis Elizondo and his Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program was in fact a hoax from Germany. But in January, I presented that pushback to physicist Eric Davis at Dr. Puthoff's Institute for Advanced Studies in Austin. He confirmed the following in an email to me on January 10th, 2018, quote, "There was a 2007 YouTube posting of the F-18 FLIR infrared video clip from the original November 2004 Nimitz encounter with the tic-tac anomalous aerial vehicle. Someone working in the Nimitz task force who was involved with gathering the FLIR videos from the F-18s had made a CD of those anomalous videos. And then he transmitted one of the videos, we're not sure if the entire CD was transmitted, to a German group that was producing a documentary. For reasons unknown, they posted the one F-18 FLIR video of the tic-tac encounter on YouTube in 2007, close quote. But according to Eric Davis, that video was and is genuine, and that both infrared videos released by the New York Times on December 16th and the Washington Post on December 18th, 2017, quote, were in fact officially and directly released by the Department of Defense, with Luis Elizondo and their chain of custody and provenance of the videos are documented at To the Stars Academy website, close quote. Well, To the Stars posted a transcript, an analysis of the controversial 34-second video that states, quote, "The UFO's orientation is now perpendicular to the horizontal plane despite the headwinds. This maneuver is executed in a manner that is inconsistent with current principles of aerodynamics and possibly indicative of a vacuum environment. As the video concludes, the object's orientation and performance seem to defy current principles of physics, such as atmospheric resistance and normal aerodynamic forces. During the orientation change, the UFO also slows to a near stop, but does not change altitude," close quote. We are going to go now to the producer of Open Minds and the 2018 International UFO Congress in Fountain Hills, Arizona, coming up. And this is Alejandro Rojas, who is going to join us on Phenomena Radio to help us dig into what has happened since the UFO headlines in mid-December, the pushback in January, his Luis Elizondo video interview upcoming at the UFO Congress, and what is happening behind the scenes about the release of a third official video, and whether or not 2018 is finally the year humans learn that we are not alone in this universe. And we welcome you, Alejandro, to Phenomena Radio with John Burroughs and me, and going right without a commercial break. We wanted to start off, first question that maybe sets the stage for where we are now, but it is a question that has been hanging over all of this since December, actually going back even to October. Why, Alejandro, do you think, from all of the research that you've been doing at Open Minds, getting together the important UFO Congress that will be coming up in mid-February, and you will have a videotape interview with Luis Elizondo, why do you think that Mr. Elizondo, Dr. Puthoff, Mr. Mullen, Mr. Semivan, and the others that joined on October 11th, why do you think that with their sophisticated work history and background with the Department of Defense, Congress, doing budgets and finances, why would the live stream event in October and evolution since have come across to the public first as a live stream web event to raise money from the public to build a spacecraft? Why was that not automatically considered kind of the wrong note to start this on, knowing that in December they were going to come out with the infrared video?
I think the answer to the question, I would say, from talking with some of the people involved and talking with Elizondo and some of the others, I get the sense that they are on their kind of islands when it comes to the UFO topic. And I think we've all heard this when it comes to different agencies and different departments, different services. They don't necessarily all share information. So they're coming from all of these different places within the military, within intelligence, and they're all interested in this topic. They've all seen from where they've come from different information that makes them think this phenomena is credible. And I think they're trying to kind of do an Elon Musk. In fact, when I talked to Tom DeLonge originally, right before he launched it, he kept calling it kind of, that was their inspiration. They feel that they've gathered enough information from observing technology that they believe is not ours, that they can actually develop technology here that they think can benefit humanity, at the same time being able to build this corporation where they can do this, in this public manner.
But the U.S. government has been back engineering extraterrestrial or other dimensional or whatever the technology is, going back to Corso and going back to the 40s. We've been retrieving non-human technology for 70 some years. We have been back engineering. It does exist. Many, many whistleblowers have testified to even working on it in laboratories. So why would suddenly in 2017, end of 2017, going into 2018, would this be presented as if nobody has built a spacecraft to go to the stars before?
Because even if that is the case, that doesn't necessarily mean that these gentlemen know that. Even if they suspect it, or even if they've seen something that gives them a reason to believe that, it doesn't mean they can come forward with that information, that they would want to come forward with that information. But they may be able to do what they can publicly to benefit, and I believe they believe, or help others benefit. They do want, to bring credibility to the whole research in this arena, but it's difficult to know for sure what these gentlemen know. It could be that they're just as in the dark as anyone else. They're not privy to the information, and they want to know what the information is as well. I think you get that sense from the Bigelow interview that was on 60 Minutes, or his interviews with George Knapp, that they really want to be in the know, but they're not. I would say Musk is similar in that he was not kind of this insider, this developer, he wasn't in the military-industrial complex, but he wanted in. And he had money, and he had the willpower, and he had technologies that he believed he could develop. And that's, I think, what they're doing. So they're using Musk as a model. I don't get the indication from any of these gentlemen that they have been in the know, but I do get a feeling that they would like to be in the know.
Well, can you possibly explain why you think Luis Elizondo, for 5 years and perhaps longer, according to an implication in the New York Times, that he still is working there, even though publicly he allegedly retired, that the office, 5th floor C ring, as the New York Times identified it, directed by Luis Elizondo, was called the Advanced Aerospace Threat. That word threat is in there. And you would assume that he would, Luis Elizondo, being the head of this office, and that his goal was to do, as his title says, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Identification would mean that the Defense Department would be taking the position that there was something about unidentified aerial phenomena, UFO, unidentified aerial vehicles, unidentified aerial craft. They use a lot of phrases. Some pose a potential threat. To even have that in the title of the office implies a lot of knowledge about what it is they're studying.
Yeah, it implies what they believe what I believe, and it appears they applied from the beginning when they started this program. From a defense perspective, and people like Nick Pope or others, if it's an unknown, you have to assume it's a threat until you can determine otherwise. And so I think it's from that standpoint, but it's also interesting, the name, the title, because it includes that advanced phrase, which is the same phrase from Bigelow Aerospace, when their program that was looking into UFOs and other phenomena was Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. Right. So I think that they, and Reed says he spoke with Bigelow, he spoke with others when they developed this department. So I believe that's kind of where the phraseology comes from when they developed this. But again, I get the sense that these people were not in the know. Even this department, I mean, we know departments, especially if it's this department started by a politician, it doesn't mean that politician then knows everything that's going on in this arena. But this would be one way for Harry Reid, along with Bigelow and Elizondo and all of the other people, Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, all of these people that have been working with Bigelow, studying all of this stuff. It would be a way for them to kind of strong-arm their way in to try to figure out something, spend some resources, and hopefully maybe even publicly be able to release some things that they know that they can't share. And that's kind of a great step forward. I think it's an interesting development in that.
And for our audience, we've done some work on this over the last few weeks. But for those who might not understand that Senator Harry Reid, then of Nevada, is the one who got money appropriated, about $24 million or $22 million over a 5-year period formally. And that's the reference to the money that you're talking about in Senator Harry Reid. Now, with this as background and with it now unclear about what has happened since the December 16th and December 18th headlines, because in those press releases, even at To the Stars Inc., it said that these two that broke through on the New York Times and the Washington Post would be followed soon by a third video. Do you know anything about the third video?
I know that the third video exists, and I know that they're planning on releasing information about that third video. So we have a Q&A at the International UFO Congress. I think you mentioned that with Elizondo, and that did get recorded. And we got questions, of course, that we had, other colleagues, and we took questions from people. So we submitted a lot of questions. At first, we were going to fly out there. Well, at first, Elizondo was going to come to the conference. He's very excited about it, wanted to meet people, wanted to answer any questions. And he made a big point. I'll answer any questions, unlike when we had Bob Lazar, who, only certain questions could be put forth. So that was great that he wanted to be so open. But he did have a medical issue, and he told me, this might be a problem, but I don't think it was. And it did become an issue where he just can't. He's got a procedure that's going to be happening that day. So he said, well, then come on out, bring some cameras. We'll do this Q&A, and you can record this. So that was the plan. Then there was some preparations for some discussions and information that I guess they wanted to release. So they decided To the Stars, they said, we're sorry, but we're going to have to record it. So they recorded it for us, and that will be coming. And so we ask a lot of these questions. And some of these questions just haven't been posed. Really, George Knapp is interviewing Elizondo tonight, and that ought to be really interesting because until tonight, there really haven't been that great of questions. The mainstream media has asked the same question over and over again. They want them to talk about aliens. They want them to say all of these things. So there's a lot we still need to know.
Haven't they been surprised by the fact that there was suddenly pushback coming even from some areas like Ron Pandolfi, who had once been director of science and technology in the CIA, and that you would have thought that he would immediately have been on board with this effort. And he took a pushback stance along with other people. And therefore, it seems to me it became confusing almost immediately after the New York Times and the Washington Post that there was not the kind of follow-up of researched interviews that you would have expected from the networks and from CNN and MSNBC. And then there came attacks and pushback on the videos, of which I addressed the whole effort that I had with Eric Davis just to try to find out what was the truth about that 34-second that was put on YouTube in 2007, and nobody knows why. They actually do not know, but they are defending the infrared video as being legitimate. And
that is another question that's in the list, too, if he knows how that video originally got leaked.
Yeah. And the big pink elephant in the room, Alejandro, going back to FDR, all of the research that's been done on Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and allegedly the retrieval of a wedge-shaped craft and 2 clone bodies, and then going to 1947, and Truman has accepted the baton of being president and is supposed to have been privy from FDR and George Wallace and that whole administration transition to the fact that our government and that Oppenheimer and Eisenhower were in on the retrieval of extraterrestrial or technology that was not human, and that even a neutronic propulsion device that was retrieved in Missouri was applied to Oppenheimer's development of the atomic bomb up in Los Alamos, and that all of this was behind them already when July of 47 came. And how many testimonies have we had about the retrieval of at least 3 wedge-shaped craft like Missouri in 41 with bodies, both dead and alive. And there are people who in the last 70 years since World War II have talked face-to-face, have provided documentation of their military background. So all of a sudden, when this comes out in the New York Times headline, as if between 2007 and 12, in those 5 years, that there was UFO investigation as if it started and stopped. And that is such an artificial superimposition on the true history that's been going on since at least 1941. That is such a huge disconnect that I don't understand how this continues to evolve with all of the back history and trying to hold a line on the Luis Elizondo office from 2007 to 12.
People have been saying, UFO researchers have known, even in government documents, we know that they've investigated this topic, despite saying blatantly we have no interest. So we know that what they've been sharing publicly or officially is not true. But that doesn't mean that, everybody would know about it. It doesn't mean Elizondo would know about it. In fact, when it came to talking to him about the topic, it was apparent that really he didn't know anything about any of the history regarding stuff that you and I may have looked into, because and he described it this way, in that, he was put in this department, and that's when his UFO investigation began. And that investigation was all about investigating these cases, these military cases that they were given to look at. And so it didn't appear that even though Bigelow was involved, that Bigelow had necessarily briefed anybody or shared information with them. They just kind of were moving forward from where they were at. So even at this point, he talks about, I'm going to have to learn more about this because I just don't know a lot about that history.
Alejandro.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's break this back down a little bit, because I have a more insight to some of these people in this group. But I want to get clarification from you, because we always hear they. Okay, now I want to make sure I understand what you were trying to say earlier. You're claiming this group that did the studies wants to get to inside information being held back by who? Who's holding this information? Who are they? And who would these people be with their backgrounds? Because Hal Puthoff was involved in the Stargate program. He was the project manager. He has one of the highest clearances the United States government gives out. Hal Puthoff also is one of the top physicists that's working on warp drive. How could he not be one of they?
I think that's very easy. Just because you have a top secret clearance, that you still don't know anything. That means you have access to 0.00001% of the secrets that are out there, of the projects that are top secret or black.
Hal Puthoff is working on the project having to do with warp drive and the technology behind what they're introducing to us.
That does not mean he would be in every project out there, especially other projects. That's what they call need to know. You don't know anything unless it's about a project. And you know, if you talk to these guys, they don't know anything about what the guy next to him is doing, and they can't. They would be, their job is not to interfere or even inquire about what the guy next to him is doing, because they know they've got their clearance for the information that they're privy to. But you make another great point, and you'll know this because I do know you know some of these guys, that they all come from very different backgrounds and perspectives. For instance, Chris Mellon, he's been talking about UFOs for some time now, and he's been working with some others, like people in UFO data. He's been working with some of the more careful scientific researchers out there, but he seems to have a different opinion, certainly than Bigelow, or he has a different perspective than Puthoff. They all have a different take and a view on what's going on. And I've gotten the sense from talking to Jim Semivan, and certainly from Tom DeLonge, they all have very different perspectives. And sometimes they address that and say, especially with Tom, I don't know where Tom's getting all of that information, but here's what I saw or I know, or here's what I believe we need to move towards, or, you know, where we need to go with this topic. So you've got a lot of different points of view. It's not dissimilar than other UFO organizations out there where we're all kind of working on different pieces of the puzzle, trying to get different pieces of information, but not necessarily sharing that information, and sometimes often being at odds with each other.
Alejandro, what you're describing is chaos. And what I mean by chaos is that for some of these people, I'll give them a pass, okay? But knowing what I know about Dr. Puthoff, knowing what I know what his group and the projects he's worked on with inside the government to include the technology that they're addressing, there is no way that man doesn't have a better understanding of what's going on. And if what you're trying to say tonight is based on your investigation and talking to people behind the scenes, is what I suspected since this came out. This is a rudderless ship that has no real direction, that they're asking people to trust them when inside their own group they don't have an educated opinion on what's really taking place. You're kind of stating the fact that they don't even know all the information or what's going on, yet they've come to the public and asked them for money, and they're asking for them to trust them and to understand what they're trying to tell them, yet they themselves don't even have a really good idea of what we're dealing with, other than there is something inside the government, someone inside the government that knows more, and even a guy like Hal Puthoff doesn't have access to this. And what I mean by, I get the compartmentalized stuff. I was in the military for 27 years. But when you're working on a specific project that has to do with warp drive and that type of technology, you have to know a lot more about it. Now, you may not know about a particular material that you're handed and you're told to analyze where it came from, but you know the capabilities of that material, and you have to know what that material is capable of doing, because you can't work on the project itself. And there's a difference between a physicist working on a project and somebody just doing an analysis.
You make a lot of great points. And let's say you're this physicist and you get this material and you notice, man, this is something that was not developed on this planet. I think this is from elsewhere. But you're not given the clearance to know that for sure. Are you going to say anything about that? Heck no. Even if you are given the clearance to know that for sure, you're not going to tell anybody about that. You're not going to tell UFO researchers. And if you decide you want to help propel the UFO research out there, or make your own, be part of a public company where you can pursue your interests that way, you're not going to tell anybody about that. So even if these guys do know what you're saying they know, doesn't mean they're going to share that information. And we can't know exactly what they know. And hopefully over time we'll be able to figure that out. But that's part of the mystery.
But they've clearly admitted that here's the problem I have with this. Number one, we have reports, but they're still classified. Okay, then if these reports are classified, it still ties back to the black world. So that means if they've had access to these reports, then they're still tied to the black world, number one, okay? But number two, that means that they're well aware of a lot more of this technology, but why go public in the first place? Why not work on the technology and develop it? There's no reason to come out and ask for the general public and raise. Yes, $2.5 million is a lot of money for just a GoFundMe project, but it's not even close. It wouldn't even begin to even start to draw plans, let alone move forward with developing this technology.
You make a lot of great points, that there are a lot of questions out there. But the other side of this, you also made another great point when you're saying you're making it sound like this is a rudderless ship. I am. You're right. In fact, I've made that point, that especially when you have a discussion with Tom DeLonge and you talk about what this organization is for and what it's going to do, and then you talk to any of the other group, you don't get the sense that they're all on the same page. Most of the group does have similar perspectives, but to prove this point, look at Tom DeLonge's media interviews out there compared to Elizondo's interviews or Chris Mellon's interviews. There's a much different tone and agenda and vision that's put forth in those. So in a way, I think you're right. I think that there are a lot of people interested in this. They've figured out that they can move forward, and they're asking the public, based on their credentials and what they've done in the past, to help them to do this. At least that's the face of what they're doing. And that's what they're trying to portray to us right now.
Whoa, come on. Wait a minute. Hold on, Alejandro. I understand what you just said. How much money are they going to need to even get this off the drawing board into the R&D phase, let alone just the theoretical phase? That's what this is. They're asking us to go on theory.
And John and Alejandro, there is not a single question in my mind that underground at places like China Lake and Area 51 and S4 and Wright Pat and other places that we don't even have the names and numbers to, that they already have not only original technology that is not from humans, but they have back engineered all kinds of technology. And 2 years ago, when we had on Lynn Buchanan, who was a remote viewer with the DIA program at the end of the 80s, and he said that one of the things that he has remote viewed, and not just him alone, that they have found that the universe is teeming with life, operating on frequencies that we on Earth as humans may not have a clue about, which would explain the so-called silent universe. But that in this teeming universe, there are friendlies, there are unfriendlies, is the way Lynn put it, and that one of his supervisors back in the 88 to 89 time period, this is coming from Lynn, who said and put this on the air on Phenomena Radio with John and me 2 years ago. He said that original boss is now head of a department in the Pentagon that is responsible for interstellar trade, and explained very coherently that where we have back engineered non-human technology retrieved from all of these places around the world for 70 years, that what we do with that retrieved technology becomes of great interest to some of the other intelligences that have not put themselves in the world public yet, but that our government knows all about, and that we actually have a trade. This is Lynn Buchanan, remote viewer, talking to us 2 years ago about a former boss of his, now in the Pentagon, who is in charge of interstellar trade routes. So the disconnect between what some people who have worked for the DIA, the CIA, NSA, NRO are saying today from the idea that we haven't developed, that we don't have access to technology that can take us already throughout the solar system and the Milky Way galaxy, it doesn't make any sense, because there have been so much more powerful discussions, and that it is tied to Truman and MJ-12.
Well, let's say that's the case. Let's be totally speculative and say, well, Tom DeLonge goes along these lines and has said something similar. Let's say even if that is the case, those people aren't sharing. That information is not getting out to the public. Those technologies are not getting out to the public. Those technologies obviously would help society, but they're not getting out. And let's say, like Tom DeLonge kind of alludes to, is that there is a group of people that are trying to get that information out, and that this is a way that is happening through him, and he's helping them, and they're letting him help spearhead this. If that is the case, that's something that is a possibility if you don't want to take what they're saying at face value. And if that is the case, that would explain why people are coming out with the information in the manner that they are, trying to kind of door hinge or put a wedge out there to get some of this out in order to help the public. At least that's a scenario that Tom DeLonge has put for us.
But if the current headlines, if the current videos, if the current statement that Luis Elizondo and the others don't know anything, then what is the group that actually has their hands on interstellar trade routes, and what is going to happen to bridge the huge disconnect between opening to the public in a way that is superficial, when behind the scenes it is way advanced beyond the idea that they could take money in a web gathering and build a ship to go to the stars, when we already are traveling out in the solar system with the help of non-humans, is my understanding.
But we aren't doing that. The public are not doing that. This is all, if this is some sort of, if this is happening in secret, it has remained secret and it hasn't come out. And there's no reason to believe, to me, that there would be anybody who would want that information to come out. Why? How would it benefit them at all?
What is the danger of telling the truth that we are on a planet that has been concocted with policies of denials while we were trying to back engineer technology hugely advanced, and some of it which we still don't understand? Why is it okay for there to be a huge global lie when there is a tiny minority that is already working and collaborating with non-humans?
I don't believe that there is an excuse for that if that was happening. I don't believe that there's a lot of people doing bad things, and that would be a very bad thing. I mean, that would not be something that I would advocate in any way. I'm just saying, looking at motives, looking at history, that if there is an organization like that, or there are people out there doing that, in history, they have not shared that information or felt like compelled to share that information. I haven't talked to any big secret holders, so I wouldn't know if, I haven't heard anybody justify something like that. So So who knows why, if that sort of thing is happening, it doesn't come out. But if you're someone who isn't in the loop and you're trying to get information out, like so many of us that are part of the public are trying to do, you would do what you can. And that is one, I think that's a scenario that Tom puts together. I think that is a similar, actually, that's one thing where all of the group kind of agrees that their goal is to bring credibility to this topic, do research, and get information out there that'll help. Let's say, speculating completely that this is some secret operation to do just that. Well, then at least now we have a valve that has been tapped and is feeding us some drips.
Alejandro, when we come back off a break, I want to talk about what you just said. If this is a rudderless ship, that they don't talk to each other, they don't work with each other.
I'm not saying all that.
Well, you said that there's a valid point that this is a rudderless ship. You said they don't talk to each other, that they don't have the facts themselves. So if all this is taking place, how is the general public going to benefit from this? But we'll do our first break. When we come back, I'd like to hear your answer on that.
This 50-minute uninterrupted segment of Phenomenon Radio is brought to you by OnlineVibes.com, your personal connection to mind, body, spirit.